I'm Jen, pastor at Gashley United Methodist Church, and we just wanted to come on and talk to you about our sermon that we had this past Sunday called Holy Ground. If you have not been here to see it or have not watched it online, we encourage you to do that at gashlandumc.org/messages. And this is my friend here, Matt, and we're going to answer some of the questions that we put forth to our congregation on Sunday. So Matt, the first question we had was, what do you believe or hope or know about God?
Well, I believe God is a loving God.
Mm-hmm.
And he created the world so that, and then he created us in his image, or God's image. And because he did that, we are an example of God.
I would agree. I think basically the same thing. I think God is definitely a loving God. And there's something comforting knowing that God has created you to be who you are. So you can live into your gifts and talents and passions that God has given you. I also know that God is a hopeful God. And so I love that sometimes God just provides us that little push of hope in situations. We talked a lot on Sunday about the burning bush and Moses, and would it have been like if Moses had not stopped to look at the burning bush or had not taken off his sandals like God instructed to understand what holy ground was. And I think for me, knowing there's that bit of hope that God is going to direct me in the right ways, even when I'm not paying attention, is very comforting.
Yeah. I also look at God as a God of second chances. Even though he created us and he called it everything good in the creation story, sin was entered into because man disobeyed God. And because of that, I have a sinful nature. And so God knows, and all through the Bible, he's a God of second chances for the Israelites, for the people in the New Testament. You mess up, but he's there to pick you back up.
Yeah, I think that's a hopeful God, right? God's going to come alongside us and make sure that we are able to have second chances, which are always important, or maybe third or fourth chances. Some of us need more chances. We're slow learners.
I'm very slow. Okay, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How do you experience God in your daily life? Or maybe in your past?
Yeah. I've shared with our congregation, if you have been here before, maybe you've been here on one of those Sundays, but I did not always believe in God. I was raised from maybe birth to 13, I think, in the United Methodist Church. But I don't feel like I learned a lot in those ages there. And then just had some trauma happen and wasn't sure I really believed that there was a God. And so I've come a really long way from not believing to being a pastor. And so a lot of that has been those second chances and having hope. And I think for me now, I see God show up in lots of different ways. I see God show up in my family, the things that my kids do. I see God show up in moments. We talked about the holy ground, but there's holy moments. And God is just, I don't know, we all fall, and it's when God is there to pick you back up and set you back on your 2 feet. And sometimes we just need that kind of pick me up. So I see God a lot.
Yeah, I do too. I think when I'm similar story, I was raised in the church. I come from the disciple tradition, but married into the Methodist Church and kind of took on that faith. But through, I would say, my college years, I started questioning. I think that's common in the development that we have as humans to start questioning why we're here, where did, what is the purpose of my life, that kind of thing. And so God shows up in those unexpected moments. And I think he allows us to go through some of the most painful things. At the time, we're like, oh, where's God? Where's God? But he's there, or God's there. I'm sorry. God is there, and he allows us to go through the situation so that we can be blessed on the other side.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for that. Those holy moments that you have is, when I see my granddaughter looking out and she's quiet and she's just staring outside, looking at the nature that's in her backyard. I'm just like, wow, God created that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned suffering or trauma or pain. And I do believe even in those moments, God is still with us. God is still there, loving on us and feeling the hurt or the pain that we feel as well. And then there to help walk with us through those moments. And that's the only reason that I'm sitting here today, is because God did those things. Even when I still would not acknowledge that God was there. I can look back now and say, oh, I see that now. But in the heat of it, in the middle of trauma or pain or suffering, sometimes you don't see those moments. But I like to say, just look for the light. There's always light somewhere, and you have to look for it sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We talked about, yesterday we talked about a trip that my husband and I took to.
Yeah, I wish I could have gone.
South Dakota. We went to South Dakota, but we ended up in Colorado, and we went to Sylvan Lake. And if you've been there, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's this beautiful lake, and my husband was climbing all the rocks, which normally I don't mind doing, but it was super hot, and we'd been in Custer State Park all day long. And I don't do well with heights. So if going up those steep little narrow roads to be on top of a rock, to see that the universe is so expansive. By the time we got to Sylvan Lake, I needed flat ground with lots of roads and things on the sides of the roads. It was a little terrifying, but I got to sit next to the lake and just listen to what was going on at the lake, which was kids giggling and people splashing. And there was a guy fishing out of a kayak, and there were people paddleboarding, and I could feel the breeze and I could hear the birds. And I just knew that this was one of those holy moments, those holy ground moments where God had created all of this. And it was so amazing. And I just was so fortunate to be able to sit there and take in what God had created. So our next question that we posed to our congregation was, how does belief in God shape how you understand yourself and others?
Well, my belief in God, I think, gives me guidance in service. I've always felt called to serve people, maybe not in a ministerial capacity, but just to be a helper. Growing up, in the kitchen, if mom was making something, I helped. I like to keep busy, and so I see my relationship with God and his call for us to love on each other and to be servants. Christ, served even us in all of our sin. He came to serve us too, and he gave us the biggest sacrifice of all in his service, to lay down his life for us. And I think that's kind of how I see my path with God.
Yeah.
How about you?
I would agree. I think God has shaped my life in lots of ways, not just serving, but I have always felt like I wasn't like a lack of self-worth, I guess would be really the way to say it. And I feel like God has come in and given me that worth by by saying, well, wait, I've created you to be who you are. And I want you to use your gifts, and you're enough. You're just enough. And so
like
that has really helped me to shape my life, to make me more confident. Anyone who knows me 5 years ago probably would be like, who's this person today? Because it's definitely not the same person. I've made lots of mistakes, and I don't know, just had a lack of self-confidence in myself. And so I think that's how God has made me feel like I do have worth, and I am enough because God created me. And that has really stuck into my head.
Yeah, there was a song on the radio this morning about just remember you're enough, and how important that is for all of us, even you out there watching us today, to know that you are enough. God created you and in his image, but he also created you and wants you to be your authentic self.
Yeah. And I can't speak for men or fathers or grandfathers, but I feel like I can say for moms and women, sometimes we get bogged down in life and being spouses and mothers and daughters, and our confidence and our worth takes a hit. And I'm sure it's the same for men too, but I just don't want to speak for men.
Well, I like to kick back and let no, seriously, it's the same.
Yeah. And so I think there were a lot of years when my kids were super little that I think I questioned every day. Now I feel like I'm a pretty good mom,
I think you're great.
I'm sure there's people better than me, but yeah, I try my best, and I try to let God lead me in those things and in conversations. And I don't know, they've turned out all right.
Yeah, they've turned out great.
Yeah,
I think
they're good. They're good.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's your question now.
Is it? Oh my. Okay. How does your knowledge about God motivate you to action in the world?
Well, I try to pay more attention. I think when I'm out and about, and again, I mentioned this on Sunday, sometimes I just miss it. I'm just thinking about my grocery list or wherever I'm headed or which kid has to be picked up. And I miss things, but I try to be aware. I try to take on opportunities when they're presented to me. So I'm doing some mentoring at our local high school with some girls. I try to be present when I'm in spaces and be aware of what's going on. I mentioned Sunday a woman that was upset in a restroom in Estes Park while we were there, and I felt called to come back in. Also serving, like you mentioned earlier, I do feel like my role as a human is to be a kind neighbor and to love others. And so in any way that I can help do that, I try to take advantage of those opportunities. Sometimes it doesn't work, but if my calendar allows, I am there to help out, I think.
Yeah. You're mentioning that just becoming aware, as we have heard over time, share the gospel, go out into the community and do all that. And I always struggle with what to say. And you've told me several times, just tell them what God's done in your life, And sometimes I think it's also just being there for people and letting them see my faith through my actions. And I love how you will pray with people. I think you prayed with somebody in the drive-thru one time.
Yes.
Tell that story. That's a good one.
We went to Burger King out in Kansas City, and I honestly, Burger King, don't come for me, but I don't really like Burger King, but my daughter does, and she demanded to be fed. So we went to Burger King, and I just said, as I was handing my money over in the drive-thru, how's your day going? And the lady said, actually, it's not going well at all. And she didn't really tell me a lot of things, but she just said she was having some struggles. And I just felt led to say, well, could I pray for you? And she was very ecstatic about that. Now, let me say, I've said that to lots of people, and sometimes people are like, no, thank you. But she was like, yes, please. And so I prayed for her in the drive-through lane at Burger King. And then as we pulled forward to get our food, of course, my daughter was like, that was ridiculous. But my family's used to that, thankfully. But yeah, weird moments like that. And you
But
do kind of have to be aware.
yeah, I think that's the key, is being aware of your surroundings. I get focused on me
Mhm.
way too much.
Well, we're human.
I know.
We all do that.
But God puts things in our
Mhm.
paths. And he's not expecting us to see them all, but he is going to tug on your heart when
Yeah.
it's important. So
Yeah, and I don't always go through drive-throughs and say, "Hey, how's your day going?" A lot of times I too am focused on just getting to whatever I have to do, and yeah. But this one, I don't know. She seemed I don't know. There was just something about her, and then I felt led to do that, and that's how I think God shapes my life, with these moments. And when you start becoming more aware of your surroundings, you're going to notice those things.
Exactly.
God just
Yeah.
leads you to do that.
We got one more question. So it says in Moses's story, God speaks through a burning bush, which we talked about. So to you, what does God's voice sound like to you?
Well, I'm going to use some sarcasm here for a second. As a woman, and I'm sure many other people have this too, but for me, I have a nagging little person that lives in my head, that constantly criticizes literally everything that I do. And I had to learn how to make her be quiet. And when I did that, well, she still visits, sometimes, but when I learned to make her a little more quiet, then I felt like I could feel God's voice, asking me to do things, leading me to do things. But that's really hard. And sometimes that voice is, the other voice, the naggy one, is very loud. But I think to me, God just is this, Wesley says, strangely warmed heart.
Yeah.
So you just, I don't know necessarily that I hear it, but I feel it.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So
like
what about you?
I like that image. Well, when I think of God's voice, okay, I think of the Charlton Heston movie, big booming voice talking to him, the lightning coming down and writing the tablets and everything. Hollywood destroyed.
I know that
they did that, but I'm with you. I think God speaks in a variety of ways. Feeling that warmth in the bird song. I love watching birds, and they're in my backyard. And so, God speaks through nature. He speaks through other people speaking to us, I think sometimes. He has them say things to me, and then he supports my thinking, I think, how to respond. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I have questioned things, and then the next person I speak to says something, and I'm like, I didn't tell you about that. But they say something that affirms whatever I was thinking. So
they were reading your mind.
Yeah, they're reading my mind. So I do think, God speaks through other people too. That's important. That's important to know.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, friends, that's probably the end of our time. We don't want to take up your whole day, but we would love for you, if you haven't watched the sermon from this past week, to go find that on gashlandumc.org/messages. Or better yet, you can come to service at Gashland here in Kansas City. We're at 7715 North Oak Traffic Way, and our service starts at 10 o'clock. We're going to continue doing this, and we will see you next week, same time. Bye.